And now let's turn to William K. Black, who's been doing a remarkable job filling in the public on the details of this incredible heist. William K. Black, welcome to On the Edge.
Hello, thank you.
Bill Black, you have written that control fraud, quote unquote, is central to the financial collapse. What is control fraud, and how did it cause the financial collapse?
Control fraud is when the people that control a seemingly legitimate organization uses it as a weapon of fraud. How did it do it in this crisis? It did it because of what the FBI began identifying in September 2004 publicly in its congressional testimony as an epidemic of mortgage fraud. And so the recipe for optimizing accounting control fraud, and accounting was the weapon of choice, it is real simple. You grow like crazy. In other words, you're like a Ponzi scheme. You make really bad loans, and those first two things are connected. I'll come back to that. The third thing is you have extreme leverage, and the fourth thing is you put on only trivial loss reserves. If you do those four things, you are absolutely guaranteed, that's the key, guaranteed, to report record short-term profits. And of course, with modern executive compensation, that means you're guaranteed to be rich as a king within a year or two. And if a bunch of lending organizations do this at the same time, you will also create a financial bubble. And you will keep it going by hyperinflating it, which will allow you to refinance the bad loans as the home prices appreciate. And that means instead of this collapsing in a year or two, it takes 7 or 8 years to collapse. And when a really big bubble collapses, then you get the Great Recession.
But let me ask you this, William K. Black. Name some of the blatant signs of fraud in the past few years that any lawmaker or prosecutor should have been able to see and stuck out like a sore thumb and basically seized on. As remember, during the Madoff case, they had many instances where the SEC had blatant signs of fraud, but they failed to act. Can you name some of these other signs that popped up?
Sure. The first one, a bit subtle, but there is no honest reason why a secured lender would ever want to inflate the appraisal value of the security property, right? The home being pledged. In fact, we know from survey evidence that intimidation of appraisers to get inflated values was common. In many places, it was the norm. Now, that itself is an act of fraud, but it also tells you more generally that the lending process has become fraudulent. Too big to be true, too good to be true is, of course, still the most famous example of this, and your point in Madoff. You can't always have positive returns that are large. I mean, that's impossible.
Right, so blatant appraisal fraud was part of the matrix of fraud. What about these rating agencies like Moody's and Fitch? They seem like they're publicly traded companies, and they are completely conflicted. They were giving their blessing to these collateralized debt obligation bonds, the bonds collateralized by the mortgages. Later find out that they seem to have a very nasty conflict of interest as well. Your thoughts?
Well, they became consultants as opposed to raters. And they got most of their, they got roughly 40% of their total income, we think, from giving these absurd AAA ratings to stuff that was, in my era, referred to as toxic waste. So this isn't a little error. It's not like they gave a AAA rating to something that was really single A or double A. This is a massive, these things should have been, below single C. These are 20-position rating errors. In other words, they didn't make these mistakes by mistake. they systematically, massively
Well, again,
undervalued risk.
They're part of the spontaneous fraud. They're another agent in the spontaneous fraud.
That's right. No one had to sit down and bribe them. They created their own compensation system. They went to premium bidding. As I said, they became more consultants where you would come to them and they would work with you to give the ratings, and shock. The rating almost always ended up for the top tranche, AAA, and what people forget in all of this is the top tranche was massive. So, if we just took a little sliver.
Okay, hold on. The top tranche is massive. Rating agencies. Let's break that down.